Its minus 43 degrees of wind is cutting across the open tundra like a blade. And this man, 65 years old, standing alone in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, just smiled, because he built something most people said was impossible: a cabin in the frozen wilderness, by himself, in less than a week. Not a tent, not a tarp shelter, a real, solid, warm structure, one that laughed in the face of the worst winter Alaska could throw at it. And the crazy part? It cost him less than most people spend on a weekend camping trip. Right now, you're going to find out exactly how he did it. Every detail, every material, every mistake he almost made, and how he fixed it before it killed him. Because this isn't just a building story, this is a survival story. And by the end of this video, you're going to know how to build this exact cabin yourself. Whether you're a seasoned homesteader, a weekend warrior, or someone who just wants a bulletproof backup plan when the world stops making sense. Stay with me, because what this man figured out in the Alaskan wilderness is something they don't teach in any school, any trade program, or any architecture course on the planet. Let's go back to the beginning. He had been watching the land for 3 years before he ever drove a single nail. 3 years of studying the wind patterns. 3 years of watching how snow accumulated. 3 years of noting where the drifts built up, where the ground stayed hardest, where the cold air pooled at night like invisible water filling a bowl. Most men his age were slowing down. He was taking notes. He had lived in Alaska for over 30 years by this point. He knew what happened to cabins that were built by people who didn't understand the land. He had seen rooftops buckle under 8 feet of accumulated snow. He had seen walls blown inward by 90-mile-per-hour gusts that came without warning. He had seen foundations heave and crack as the permafrost shifted beneath them like a living thing. He had learned every single one of those lessons without having to suffer them himself. And that education led him to one very specific answer: the Quonset arch. Now, if you've never heard that word before, stay with me, because this design is one of the most underrated, most overlooked, and most powerful building concepts in human history. The Quonset hut was originally developed for the United States military during World War II. They needed a structure that could be assembled fast, survive brutal weather, and be transported anywhere in the world. Engineers came up with a half-cylinder shape, a perfect arch made from corrugated steel that could be bolted together by untrained soldiers in under a day. Tens of thousands of these structures were built across the Pacific, across Europe, across the Arctic. They survived everything: typhoons, artillery vibration, desert heat, Arctic freeze. The arch shape was a secret. When snow falls on a curved surface, it doesn't pile up, it slides. When wind hits a curved surface, it doesn't push. It wraps around and keeps moving. The shape itself defeats the two biggest enemies of any cold weather structure. He knew all of this, and he had a plan to take that military-grade concept and turn it into the most efficient, most affordable, most livable small cabin ever built in the Alaskan interior. But here's what nobody talks about when they discuss Quonset buildings. The original military huts were enormous, 40 feet wide, 60 feet long, built for storing aircraft or housing entire platoons of soldiers. He didn't need any of that. He needed something a single man could build alone, something small enough to heat with a modest wood stove, something compact enough that every cubic foot of interior air could be brought to a comfortable temperature without burning through an entire cord of wood every 3 days. So he scaled it down, way down. His design was 14 feet long and 10 feet wide, from the ground to the peak of the arch, just under 8 feet, small enough to feel intimate, large enough to sleep comfortably, cook a meal, store supplies, and wait out a storm that would kill you if you were standing outside in it. He called it his mini Quonset cabin, and the moment he finished it and stepped inside for the first time, with the wood stove burning and the temperature outside at minus 31, he knew he had built something extraordinary. Here's exactly how he did it, step by step. No fluff, no filler. The first decision was a foundation, and this is where most first-time builders in cold climates make a fatal mistake. They pour concrete. In permafrost country, concrete is a liability. The ground moves. It heaves. It shifts by inches every year as it freezes and thaws and freezes again. A concrete foundation that was level in October can be tilted by March. Cracks form, walls rack, doors stop closing. He didn't pour a single yard of concrete. Instead, he used pressure-treated lumber skids, essentially thick wooden runners laid directly on the frozen ground, the same way a traditional Alaskan cache or trapper's cabin has been built for over a century. 4 skids, each one a 4x6 beam, 12 feet long, laid parallel to each other, spaced evenly, positioned so that the entire floor frame would rest on top of them. Because the structure was small and relatively light, the skids distributed the weight broadly enough to prevent sinking. And because they were wood, flexible, slightly forgiving, they could accommodate minor ground movement without cracking or failing. He also chose his site carefully. He found a spot with a slight natural grade, not flat, not steep, just a gentle slope, so that any meltwater would drain away from the structure rather than pooling beneath it. The skids went down in 4 hours. Then came the floor frame. Standard 2x6 lumber, laid on 16-inch centers, spanning between the skids. Over the top of that, 2 layers of rigid foam insulation, 2 inches of polyester board, then another 2 inches, for a total R value on the floor of approximately R26. In -40 temperatures, your floor is where you lose the most heat. Most people insulate their walls and forget the ground beneath their feet. He didn't make that mistake. Over the foam insulation went the subfloor, 3/4-inch tongue-and-groove plywood, glued and screwed. Solid, tight, no gaps, no cold spots. The floor alone took 1 full day. Day 2 was the arch panels. He had sourced his corrugated steel panels from a farm supply company, the same kind of steel used for agricultural buildings, grain bins, and equipment storage across the rural American North. 16-gauge galvanized corrugated steel, cut to his specifications. Each arch panel was pre-curved at the factory. This is important. Do not try to bend corrugated steel by hand in the field. The results are inconsistent. The curves are irregular, and the panels won't seat properly against each other when you try to bolt them together. Order them pre-curved. It costs a little more. It saves you an enormous amount of frustration. He had ordered 10 arch sections, each one bolted to the next using stainless steel hardware, not galvanized, not zinc-coated, but stainless. In wet, freezing conditions, inferior fasteners rust within a single season. Stainless steel lasts decades. The arch sections went up faster than he expected. By noon on day 2, the skeleton of the cabin was standing, a perfect half-cylinder of corrugated steel, gleaming dully in the flat gray light of the Alaska winter sky. He stood back and looked at it. It looked like something from another world. Standing alone on that white plain, this strange curved silver shape rising from the snow, it looked like a spacecraft had landed and the pilot had gone to gather firewood. He smiled, got back to work. The end walls were next, and this is where the Quonset design gets its character. The 2 open ends of the arch, front and back, needed to be closed in. He framed them with standard 2x4 lumber, following the curve of the arch on the outside edge and building square walls on the interior. This created a slightly complex geometry, but nothing beyond the skill of any competent carpenter. The front wall got the door. He had brought a solid core with door, not a hollow core interior door, not a pre-hung fiberglass unit, but a real heavy, dense solid core door that wouldn't warp, wouldn't let air infiltrate through its layers, and wouldn't let you down when it was 40 below and you needed it to swing shut cleanly and latch securely. He also cut a small window into the front wall, just 12 inches by 18 inches, small enough to minimize heat loss, large enough to let in light, and to let him see what was happening outside without opening the door. The back wall was solid. No window, no door, just insulated framing and exterior sheathing. Both end walls were insulated with spray foam, the kind that comes in a can for small applications, injected into every cavity, every gap, every joint between the wooden framing and the steel arch, then covered inside with half-inch plywood panels, painted white to reflect light. Day 3 was insulation of the arch itself. This is the step that separates a Quonset cabin that works from one that fails. Raw corrugated steel is a superb conductor of heat. In winter, without insulation, the inside surface of those steel panels will be almost exactly the same temperature as the outside air. Touch them without gloves and your skin will stick. Any moisture in your interior air will condense and freeze directly on the walls. Your stove will work itself to death trying to heat a metal shell that radiates cold like a radiator in reverse. He used 2-inch closed cell spray foam applied directly to the interior surface of the steel arch panels. Closed cell, not open cell. The difference matters enormously. Closed cell spray foam has an R value of approximately R6 per inch. 2 inches gives you R12 on the walls. More importantly, closed cell foam is a vapor barrier. It prevents moisture from reaching the cold steel surface. It bonds directly to the corrugated steel and stays bonded even through dramatic temperature swings. It is rigid, structural, and permanent. He rented a spray foam rig for the day, suited up in a respirator and coveralls, and coated every square inch of the interior arch surface. It took 3 hours. When he finished, the interior of the cabin had transformed. What had been a cold, echoing metal shell was now a pale yellow cocoon, warm to the touch even before the stove was lit, quiet, sealed, and ready. The wood stove went on day 4. He had chosen a small, cast-iron box stove, roughly the size of a large microwave oven, rated for spaces up to 800 cubic feet. His cabin's interior was approximately 700 cubic feet, a perfect match. The stovepipe exited through the roof at the highest point of the arch, straight up through a properly flashed and sealed penetration, and extended 3 feet above the roof line to ensure adequate draw. He built a small non-combustible hearth pad from cement board and ceramic tile. Simple, functional. It protected the plywood subfloor and gave him a safe surface for the stove to sit on. The first fire he built in that stove was a modest one. Small splits of birch, nothing more. He wasn't trying to heat the space quickly. He was curing the stove, burning off the factory coatings at low temperature first, then gradually building heat over several hours so the cast iron could expand and contract slowly, seasoning itself for the work ahead. By evening, the cabin interior was 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside, it was minus 29, a temperature differential of nearly 100 degrees, maintained by a stove the size of a small suitcase, burning birchwood at a rate he could sustain for months on a single cord. He sat in the cabin that first night with a cup of coffee and listened to the wind work on the outside of that steel arch. It screamed, it gusted, it hammered. The arch didn't care. The snow slid off the curved surface in long whispering sheets. Inside, the stove ticked quietly. He was warm. There are things you can't fully understand about a structure until you've lived in it, through weather that wants to kill you. He spent 11 days in that cabin during his first day. He learned things about it during those 11 days that no blueprint, no calculation, no engineering table could have told him. He learned that the arch created surprising acoustic warmth. The curved ceiling bounced sound in a way that made the interior feel intimate and enclosed rather than hollow. He had expected the steel to make the space feel industrial. Instead, with the foam insulation, the plywood interior panels, it felt almost like a barrel, round, close safe. He learned that the small window he had almost decided to skip entirely was absolutely essential to his sanity. Even in overcast Alaska winter light, that rectangle of gray sky was enough to keep him oriented, to remind him which direction was outside, to give his eyes somewhere to go when the walls felt close. He learned that the solid core door he had chosen, heavy, stubborn, requiring real effort to swing open and pull shut, was one of the best decisions he made in the entire build. Every time he came in from outside, stamping snow off his boots and pulling that door shut behind him, the seal created was absolute. No draft, no cold fingers of air finding the gap at the bottom, just silence and warmth. He learned that a cabin this size, this well-insulated, this tightly sealed, will maintain temperature from a single evening fire until well past midnight. He did not have to wake up at 3 a.m. to feed the stove. He did not wake up cold. He woke up at a comfortable 52 degrees and had the interior back to 65 in under 40 minutes. And he learned something else. Something that surprised him even after 30 years in the Alaskan wilderness. He learned that small is powerful. Every unnecessary cubic foot of space in a building is a liability in extreme cold. Every extra square foot of wall is a surface through which heat escapes. Every vaulted ceiling is a reservoir where your expensive, hard-earned warmth floats uselessly out of reach above your head. His 14-foot cabin put everything within arm's reach. His sleeping area, his cooking area, his supply storage, his firewood stack, all of it accessible without taking more than 2 steps in any direction. In survival conditions, that proximity isn't a limitation. It's a lifeline. Here is what the total build cost him. The corrugated steel arch panels, pre-curved and delivered to his nearest road-accessible point, $1,100. The lumber for the floor frame, end walls, and interior finishing, $420. The rigid foam floor insulation, $180. The closed cell spray foam for the arch interior, $240. The solid core door, $110. The small window, $60. The stovepipe kit, $95. Fasteners, flashing, caulk, paint, and miscellaneous hardware, $115. The cast ironwood stove, $280. Total, $2,600. For a structure that will stand for 30 years without rotting, without rusting through, without requiring a single significant repair as long as the stovepipe is kept clear and the door hinges are oiled once a season. $2,600 to own a piece of Alaskan wilderness shelter that no storm can take from you. That number matters, because it means this cabin is not a fantasy for wealthy survivalists or reality TV personalities. It is achievable, right now, by almost anyone watching this video who is willing to spend 4 days working hard in cold weather. He is 65 years old. He built this alone, with hand tools and a rented spray rig, and a come-along and a cordless drill. He did not have a construction crew. He did not have an excavator. He did not have a concrete truck or a crane or a laser level. He had knowledge. He had patience. He had 30 years of watching the land teach him what it needed. And he had the willingness to try something that most people would have dismissed as too simple, too small, too unconventional. The arch is still standing. It has been through 2 full Alaskan winters since he completed it. It has seen temperatures below -50 with wind chill. It has had 4 feet of snow load on its roof, or rather, briefly on its roof, before the arch shrugged and the snow slid to the ground. It has been buffeted by winds that knocked down trees within 200 yards of it. It has not moved. It has not leaked. It has not failed. And every time he walks across that white plain toward it, sees a stovepipe sending up its thin thread of smoke into the gray sky, pulls open a heavy door and steps into the warmth inside, he feels something that most men his age have stopped feeling. He feels capable. He feels relevant. He feels like a man who solved a hard problem in a hard place and built something real with his own hands that the world cannot easily take away from him. That is what this cabin is really about. Not the steel, not the foam, not the stove. It's about proving to yourself, to anyone watching, that with the right knowledge, the right design, and the right mindset, you can build something that stands against anything. Even an Alaskan winter. Even time. Even a voice in your head that says you're too old, too inexperienced, too alone to pull it off. He didn't listen to that voice. And right now, somewhere on the Alaskan plain, his stove is burning, his arch is shedding snow, and his cabin is exactly as warm as it needs to be. Build yours.